What if everything you were taught about prayer was designed to keep you powerless? Christopher Hewitt had no idea that the metallic crash echoing through his Montana property on that storm-ravaged night would shatter every belief he'd held for 63 years. What he discovered in his field wasn't just impossible. It was the key to understanding why decades of faithful prayer had never been answered. The being from another world didn't just need his help. It carried a truth about Jesus Christ that churches have buried for 2,000 years. A truth so powerful, so transformative, that once you understand it, your entire existence will finally make sense. But I warn you now, this knowledge comes with a price. It will illuminate the blind spots in your life, but it will cast shadows over everything you thought was absolute truth. If you're ready to confront what you've been told is sacred, then stay with me. Because what Christopher Hewitt witnessed that night was not the end of a journey. It was the beginning of a revelation that has been frozen in time for millennia. Not thunder. Christopher Hewitt was a man who'd learned to live with disappointment. At 63, divorced for 12 years, living alone on 40 acres of Montana wilderness, he'd made peace with the silence. His days followed a rhythm: wake at dawn, coffee on the porch, repair work in his shop, prayers before bed that seemed to evaporate into an indifferent sky. The storm hit on a Tuesday night in late September. Thunder rolled across the mountains like artillery fire. Rain hammered the roof of his small ranch house with such violence that Christopher wondered if the shingles would hold. He lay in bed listening to the chaos outside when the sound came. A metallic boom that shook the ground beneath his house, rattling the windows in their frames. Christopher sat bolt upright, heart hammering. That wasn't a tree falling. That was something massive, something heavy, hitting the earth with tremendous force. Something else entirely. He waited, listening. The storm continued its assault, but there were no more unusual sounds, probably debris from someone's barn, he told himself. He'd check it in the morning. But sleep wouldn't come. Something about that sound felt wrong. Too precise, too controlled to be random storm damage. Finally, as gray dawn light began filtering through his curtains, Christopher gave up on sleep. He made coffee, pulled on his work boots, and grabbed his binoculars from the kitchen drawer. What he saw through his kitchen window made him freeze mid-sip. There was something in the eastern field. Something large, metallic, catching the early morning light in a way that seemed almost liquid. The shape was wrong, too smooth, too geometric, too deliberate to be natural. Through the lenses, details emerged that made his rational mind rebel. It wasn't wreckage. It was a craft of some kind, roughly the size of a small helicopter, but the design was unlike anything he'd ever seen. No rotors, no visible engine. The surface seemed to flow and shift in the light, colors rippling across it like oil on water, and there were no seams, no rivets, no welds. It looked as though it had been grown rather than built. And there was something moving around it. Christopher raised the binoculars with trembling hands. Christopher's hands shook so badly, he nearly dropped the binoculars. The figure was humanoid, but distinctly not human. Taller than average, with limbs that seemed slightly too long, too thin. Even from this distance, he could see the skin had an unusual grayish tone. The head was larger than it should be. The movements fluid, but somehow alien. The figure was crouched beside an open panel in the craft, working on something that emitted a soft blue glow. "This isn't happening," Christopher whispered to his empty kitchen. "This is not happening." He forced himself to breathe, to think. He was a mechanic, a practical man who'd spent 40 years solving problems with his hands. Whatever this was, it was real. It was in his field, and he needed to decide what to do about it. Christopher ducked away from the window, his heart threatening to burst from his chest. His mind raced through possibilities. Call the police, call the military, call someone, but what would he say? There's an alien in my field. They'd think he'd lost his mind. But it was happening. And as he watched, the being suddenly stopped working and turned its head directly toward his house, as if it had sensed his observation. The being had returned to its work, seemingly unconcerned with Christopher's presence. It moved with purpose, clearly trying to repair something, And as Christopher watched, he recognized something in those movements. The frustration of someone dealing with a mechanical failure, the careful testing of connections, the methodical troubleshooting. It was trying to fix its ship. Slowly, carefully, he looked out the window again, and it was stuck. Christopher stood at that window for 20 minutes, watching his coffee growing cold in his hand. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to stay inside, to call someone, to let this be someone else's problem. But there was another part of him, the part that had spent a lifetime fixing broken things, the part that understood what it meant to be stranded and helpless, that felt something unexpected. Finally, Christopher made a decision that would change everything. He set down his coffee cup, walked to his gun cabinet, and retrieved his hunting rifle. Not to use it, probably, but to have it. Then he took a deep breath, opened his front door, and stepped out into the morning light. The walk across his field felt like the longest journey of his life. Every step brought him closer to something impossible, something that violated every law of reality he'd ever known. His finger rested near the trigger guard, not quite touching, but ready. Curiosity, and against all logic, a strange sense of kinship. They stared at each other across the Montana grass, human and alien, both frozen in mutual assessment. The being turned to face him fully, and Christopher got his first clear look at it. The skin was indeed grayish, with a subtle texture like fine leather. The eyes were enormous, black, glossy, and utterly alien, yet somehow expressive. The face had a small nose, a thin mouth, and an overall structure that was humanoid enough to be recognizable, but different enough to be deeply unsettling. At 50 feet away, he stopped. And Christopher heard a voice, not with his ears, but inside his mind. "Please, I mean no harm. I am stranded. I need help." Then the being slowly raised one hand, palm forward, in what could only be interpreted as a gesture of peace. "Get out," he whispered. "Get out of my head." Christopher's rifle nearly slipped from his hands. The voice was calm, measured, almost gentle, but it was in his head. "I apologize. This is the only way I can communicate. I have no vocal cords as you do. Please, I am not a threat. My ship is damaged. I cannot repair it alone." Christopher took a step backward, then another. His entire worldview was crumbling. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. But it was. The being remained still, hand still raised in that peaceful gesture. Those impossible eyes fixed on him with what looked almost like, "You are a mechanic." The voice continued. "I observed your workshop. You understand how systems work. You can help me repair the propulsion matrix. Please, I only want to go home." "Home?" Christopher repeated aloud, his voice shaking. "Where the hell is home?" "Very far from here. But I can return if the ship is functional. I will leave immediately. You will never see me again. I promise you this." "If I help you," Christopher said slowly, his rifle still raised, "you swear you'll leave? You won't hurt me? You won't bring others?" Christopher's mind raced. This was insane, completely insane. He should run. He should call someone. He should do anything except what he was considering. But that voice in his head, there was something in it. Desperation, loneliness, fear, emotions. He recognized all too well. And Christopher Hewitt had never been able to walk away from something broken. Christopher looked at the craft, then back at the being. Every instinct screamed danger, but there was something else too. A mechanical problem, a puzzle, something broken that needed fixing. "I swear on the universal laws that govern all conscious beings. I will leave as soon as I am able. I have no desire to harm you or to remain here. I am as frightened as you are." Slowly, very slowly, he lowered his rifle. "All right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But first we're moving this thing into my workshop. If anyone sees this, we're both in trouble." The being's posture seemed to relax slightly. "Thank you. Thank you. I am called Zephyr in your language, and you are Christopher Hewitt. I scanned your property before attempting to land. I tried to avoid your dwelling, but the storm damaged my navigation systems. The crash was unintentional. How do you know my name? Christopher nodded slowly, still processing the impossibility of having a telepathic conversation with an alien being. Okay, Zephyr. Let's get this thing hidden before someone drives by. It took the better part of an hour to rig up his truck's winch system and carefully drag the craft into his large workshop. The ship was surprisingly light, far lighter than its size suggested, as if it were made of some material that defied conventional physics. Once inside with the workshop doors closed, Christopher finally allowed himself to truly look at what he was dealing with. The craft was beautiful in its strangeness, all flowing curves and seamless surfaces, with that panel open to reveal technology that looked more like art than machinery. All right, Christopher said, setting his rifle aside but keeping it within reach. Show me what's broken. And as Zephyr began to explain, telepathically, impossibly, the nature of the damage, Christopher Hewitt had no idea that he was about to receive an education that would shatter everything he thought he knew about God, prayer, and the true teachings of Jesus Christ. The truth was about to set him free. But first, it would terrify him. The first day working on the alien craft was controlled chaos. Christopher's hands shook as he examined the propulsion matrix, a crystalline structure that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Every few minutes he'd glance at Zephyr, still half convinced this was an elaborate hallucination brought on by isolation and too much coffee. But the being was real. The craft was real. And the technology before him was unlike anything he'd encountered in 4 decades of mechanical work. This crystal is the heart of the propulsion system. Zephyr's voice explained in his mind. It converts thought energy into physical force. But the resonance chamber is cracked. Without it, I cannot generate the field necessary for dimensional travel. Dimensional travel, Christopher repeated, his voice flat. Right. Of course. Difficult? Christopher let out a sharp laugh. I'm repairing a spaceship for an alien in my workshop in Montana. Difficult doesn't begin to cover it. I understand this is difficult for you to process. But despite the surrealism, Christopher found himself falling into familiar patterns. A broken system was a broken system. Whether it was a 1985 Ford engine or an interdimensional spacecraft, he examined the crack in the crystal, noting how the fracture disrupted the internal light patterns. I don't have replacement alien crystals, he said dryly, but I might be able to stabilize this with high-grade epoxy and carbon fiber reinforcement. It won't be pretty, but it might hold long enough for you to get home. Your improvisation skills are impressive. As he worked, carefully applying the epoxy mixture to the crystal fracture, Christopher's fear began to give way to curiosity. Questions bubbled up. Questions he'd never imagined asking. So he said, not looking up from his delicate work, where exactly are you from? I mean, how far? 40 years of making do with what I have. Christopher began gathering materials from his workshop shelves. You learn to adapt. Christopher's hand slipped slightly. 39 light years? That's impossible. Nothing can travel that fast. My home world orbits a binary star system you call Zeta Reticuli, approximately 39 light years from Earth. Nothing travels that fast. We don't cross distance, we fold space-time. We move through dimensions you haven't discovered yet. Dimensions. Christopher shook his head, focusing on the repair work. And you can just go anywhere, see anything? Christopher hesitated, the question forming before he could stop it. Can you go to heaven? Within certain limitations, yes. Why do you ask? There was a pause. The first time Zephyr had hesitated in their communication. Heaven? You mean the religious concept? A physical place where your God resides? Yeah. That heaven. No, Christopher. Heaven as you imagine it. A location in the clouds where God sits on a throne does not exist. There is no such place I can travel to. Something cold settled in Christopher's stomach. So there's no heaven, no God. I did not say that. Zephyr's mental voice was gentle but firm. I said there is no physical location called heaven, but source. What you call God absolutely exists. just not in the way your religions have taught you. Within me, Christopher touched his chest. You're saying God is inside me? God is not an entity sitting in judgment somewhere in the sky. God is a field of consciousness, the creative force underlying all existence. God is everywhere simultaneously, including within you. Christopher set down his tools and turned to face the being fully. What do you mean? The Bible was written by humans, translated by humans, interpreted by humans, with their own agendas. It contains truths, yes, but also distortions, especially about the nature of God and what Jesus actually taught. God has always been within you. The problem is that you've been taught to look outside yourself, to pray to an external deity, to seek salvation from an external source, when the truth is, the power you seek has been inside you all along. Christopher felt his heart rate accelerate. The Bible says, Jesus. Christopher's voice came out as barely a whisper. You know about Jesus? We know a great deal about Jesus of Nazareth. We observed him, we recorded him, we watched what he taught, and we watched how his teachings were systematically distorted after his death. Christopher sank onto his workbench stool, his legs suddenly weak. You observed Jesus? The actual, historical Jesus? Yes. Your species was at a critical evolutionary juncture 2,000 years ago, just as you are now. We observe such moments. Jesus was particularly interesting because he understood something most humans did not. What? What did he understand? He understood the universal laws of manifestation, how consciousness creates physical reality, how thought and emotion, properly directed, can reshape the material world, and he tried to teach this to humanity. Christopher's mind reeled. Manifestation, creating reality, that sounds like New Age nonsense. It sounds like nonsense, because you've been taught it's nonsense, but it is fundamental physics, quantum mechanics that your scientists are only beginning to understand. Consciousness collapses probability waves into physical reality. Thought, amplified by emotion, creates material experience. That's, Christopher struggled for words. That's not what the church teaches. Not wrong. Incomplete. Distorted. The core truths are there, buried under centuries of institutional manipulation. No, it is not. Because if people understood their own creative power, they would not need religious institutions. They would not need intermediaries between themselves and God. They would be free. Christopher stood abruptly, pacing the workshop. This is crazy. You're telling me everything I've been taught is wrong. Very well. But first, finish the repair. Then I will show you something that will change your understanding of everything. The second day, Christopher worked with renewed intensity. Driven by a desperate need to know if what Zephyr claimed was true, his hands moved with practiced efficiency, reinforcing the crystal matrix, reconnecting energy conduits that looked more like living tissue than wires. Prove it, Christopher said suddenly, turning to face Zephyr. If this is real, if any of this is real, prove it to me. As he worked, he couldn't stop thinking about his prayers, decades of prayers that had seemingly vanished into an empty sky. Every night for 40 years, he'd knelt beside his bed and asked God for help, for health, for companionship, for financial stability, for anything. And nothing had ever changed. I pray every day, Christopher said suddenly, breaking hours of silence, every single day for most of my life. And God has never answered, not once. Help, healing, for things to get better, the basics. What do you pray for? Zephyr asked. And how do you pray? What are your exact words? And there is your problem. Christopher felt suddenly exposed, but he answered, I say, Lord, please help me. I don't have enough money. My health is failing. I'm so alone. Please, please help me. What problem? I'm being humble. I'm asking for help. You are not asking for help. You are decreeing scarcity. Every word of your prayer is saturated with the frequency of lack. I don't have enough. I am failing. I am alone. You are not requesting abundance. You are manifesting more scarcity. God is not answering because you are not asking correctly. You are using the creative power of your consciousness to manifest exactly what you do not want. Christopher felt anger flash through him. So you're saying I'm praying wrong? That it's my fault God doesn't answer? Christopher threw down his wrench, the clang echoing through the workshop. So what am I supposed to do? Pretend I'm not struggling? Lie to God? That doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense when you understand how manifestation works. Every thought is a seed. Every emotion is water. You plant seeds of scarcity and water them with emotions of fear and desperation. Then you wonder why you harvest more scarcity. You are not supposed to pretend. You are supposed to operate at the frequency of what you desire, not the frequency of what you lack. This is what Jesus taught. This is what the church buried. Show me, Christopher demanded. You said you'd show me. Show me what Jesus actually taught. Finish the repair first. Tonight, I will show you recordings that will shatter everything you believe. By the third day, the craft was nearly functional. Christopher had improvised solutions that would have been impossible with conventional materials, but somehow, working with Zephyr's guidance, he'd managed to stabilize the propulsion matrix. There, he said finally, stepping back from the craft, that should do it. I can't test it without powering it up, and I don't want to blow up my workshop. As he made the final connections, his hands were steady, but his mind was chaos. Tonight, Zephyr had promised to show him the truth about Jesus, and Christopher was terrified of what he might see. It will not explode. I can feel the energy flowing correctly. You have remarkable talent, Christopher. 40 years of practice. He wiped his hands on a rag. So, are you going to show me what you promised? Zephyr moved to a panel on the craft's exterior. Those long fingers touched a sequence of points that began to glow with soft blue light. The air in the center of the workshop began to shimmer and distort. A man in simple robes, dark hair, dark eyes, surrounded by people listening intently. And then an image formed. Not on a screen, not projected on a wall, but floating in three-dimensional space. So real and detailed that Christopher could have sworn the figure was actually standing there in his workshop. Christopher felt all the air leave his lungs. Is that really him? Yes. This is a holographic recording from approximately 2,000 years ago. This specific moment is crucial. Jesus attempting to explain something his followers could not fully comprehend. He is teaching about the true nature of prayer, about how to properly use the creative power within human consciousness. Watch. Christopher approached the image slowly, as if it might vanish if he moved too quickly. The detail was extraordinary. He could see individual threads in the robe, the texture of the man's skin, the intensity in his eyes. What is he saying? The scene changed. Now Jesus was standing before a fig tree, his hand extended toward it. Christopher recognized the story. Jesus cursing the fig tree, causing it to wither. The image shifted, showing Jesus gesturing emphatically, pointing first to the sky, then to his own chest, then to his disciples. His mouth moved, speaking words Christopher couldn't hear, but the passion in his expression was unmistakable. He is saying the kingdom of God is within you, not in some distant heaven, not in a temple, inside your own consciousness. He is telling them if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what was done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, be removed and cast into the sea, it will be done. Watch what happens next. Zephyr instructed. The image showed Jesus turning to his shocked disciples, speaking with urgent intensity. No, he is talking about faith in the creative power of consciousness. He did not say, ask God to move the mountain. He said, you will say to the mountain, and it will be done. He was teaching direct manifestation through consciousness. Christopher shook his head. That's giving too much power to humans. We're not God. I know that verse, Christopher said. But he's talking about faith in God. You are not God, but you are extensions of God. Individualized expressions of the same creative consciousness. Just as a wave is not the ocean, but is made of the ocean. The holographic image shifted again, showing Jesus performing a healing. Christopher watched as Jesus placed his hands on a sick person, and the person stood, clearly restored to health. This is the part the church misunderstands most profoundly. Zephyr said, "Watch the energy fields." The image changed slightly. Now there were glowing auras around both figures. Jesus radiating brilliant gold light, the sick person's aura dim and gray. Jesus did not heal in the sense of doing something to the person. He raised the person's energetic frequency to a level where disease could not exist. He activated the healing capacity already within them. How? Through absolute certainty. Through operating at such a high frequency of consciousness that physical reality rearranged itself to match. This is what he meant when he said, "Your faith has made you well." It was not metaphor, it was literal instruction. Christopher watched as Jesus's bright energy seemed to flow into the sick person, and their aura began to glow brighter, stronger. So he was like a healer, someone with special powers. See how he prayed before performing miracles? He did not beg, he did not plead, he thanked God as if he had already received what he desired. He was someone who understood and mastered the laws of consciousness that govern physical reality. Laws that are available to everyone, but which almost no one understands or uses correctly. The image changed once more, showing Jesus alone, kneeling in prayer. But his posture was different from anything Christopher had seen in church paintings. His face was uplifted, his expression one of joy and gratitude, not supplication. Thanking before receiving. That doesn't make sense. Christopher felt his worldview cracking like the crystal he'd just repaired. So you're saying Jesus wasn't performing miracles through God's power. He was using some kind of mental technique. It makes perfect sense when you understand manifestation. By operating at the frequency of gratitude, the frequency of already having, he aligned his consciousness with the desired outcome, and physical reality shifted to match that frequency. Because people who understand their own power do not need institutions. They do not need priests as intermediaries. They do not pay tithes. They do not blindly obey. The church built an empire on human dependence. Jesus' true teachings would have destroyed that empire. He was using God's power. But God's power flows through consciousness, not from some external source. This is what he tried to teach. This is what the church buried. Why? Why would they bury it? And I've been doing it wrong my whole life. Christopher sank onto his workbench, his mind reeling. So everything I've been taught, everything I've believed, contains fragments of truth, buried under centuries of distortion. But the core teaching remains, hidden in plain sight in your own scriptures. Ask and you shall receive. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door will be opened. But you must ask correctly. You must seek in the right place. You must knock on the right door. Yes, but now you know. And knowing changes everything. Teach me, he whispered. Teach me how to do it right. Christopher looked up at the holographic image of Jesus, still frozen in that moment of prayer, face uplifted in gratitude and certainty. I will. But first you must prove to yourself that this is real. Tomorrow we will conduct an experiment. You will manifest something small, something specific, using the technique Jesus used. And when you succeed, you will know beyond doubt that everything I have told you is true. And Christopher realized with a shock that shook him to his core. He had never prayed with certainty, not once in his entire life. That night, Christopher lay in bed, unable to sleep. The holographic images played over and over in his mind. Jesus teaching, Jesus healing, Jesus praying with absolute certainty, but never with the absolute knowing that Jesus had demonstrated. He had always prayed with hope, with desperation, with pleading. Tomorrow that would change, and nothing would ever be the same. Tomorrow, Christopher Hewitt would learn to manifest reality itself. Christopher woke at 5:47 a.m., the numbers glowing on his bedside clock. He stared at them for a moment, feeling an odd sense of significance he couldn't quite name, then dismissed it as pre-dawn confusion. Today was the day Zephyr had promised to teach him the technique, the actual method Jesus had used to manifest reality. Christopher's stomach churned with a mixture of excitement and skepticism. Part of him still wondered if he'd had some kind of breakdown, if the isolation had finally gotten to him and he'd invented an elaborate delusion. But when he walked into his workshop and saw the alien craft sitting there, solid and real and impossible, he knew this was no delusion. Zephyr was already awake, or whatever passed for awake for an alien being. Good morning, Christopher. Are you ready? First, you must understand the formula. It is simple, but most humans get it wrong. The formula is clear intention plus elevated emotion plus absolute certainty equals manifestation. Ready as I'll ever be. Christopher poured coffee from his thermos with shaking hands. So how does this work? What am I supposed to do? That's it? That's the big secret? Something small and specific. Something that would be unlikely to appear by random chance. So you will know it was intentional manifestation. Christopher sipped his coffee. Okay, so what am I manifesting? The formula is simple. The execution is extraordinarily difficult because it requires complete mental discipline. Most humans cannot maintain elevated emotion and absolute certainty for more than a few seconds before doubt creeps in. Christopher thought for a moment. How about a number? A specific number that has meaning to me. Perfect. What number? 47. It was my ex-wife's lucky number. She used to see it everywhere, said it was a sign. I always thought she was being superstitious. I haven't thought about that number in years, but I haven't seen it yet. Excellent choice. Now here is what you must do. You will not ask to see the number. You will not hope to see it. You will not expect to see it. You will operate as if you have already seen it. Exactly the problem. You are operating in current reality. You must operate in desired reality, as if it has already occurred. This is what Jesus did perfectly. He thanked God for the multiplication of loaves before the loaves multiplied. He operated at the frequency of abundance before abundance physically manifested. Zephyr Sir moved to the craft and retrieved something. A small crystal similar to the ones in the propulsion matrix but smaller. About the size of a coin. It glowed with soft blue light. Hold this. It will help amplify your intention while you are learning. Christopher took the crystal. It was warm, pulsing gently against his palm like a heartbeat. Then remember a time when something good happened unexpectedly. Remember how that felt. The surprise, the joy, the satisfaction. Hold that feeling and attach it to the memory of seeing the number 47. Now, close your eyes. Think of the number 47, but do not think of it as something you want to see. Think of it as something you have already seen. Feel the emotion of having already encountered it. Christopher closed his eyes, feeling ridiculous. I don't know how to feel something that hasn't happened. He held on to that feeling and tried to imagine seeing the number 47 somewhere unexpected, on a license plate, on a sign, somewhere that would make him stop and notice. Christopher tried. He thought back to moments of unexpected good fortune. Finding $20 in an old jacket, getting a call about a well-paying repair job, the first time his daughter had said, "I love you, Daddy," without prompting. That warm feeling in his chest. That lightness. That sense of rightness. "Thank you," Christopher whispered, feeling foolish, but continuing anyway. "Thank you for showing me the number 47. Thank you for this confirmation." The feeling in his chest grew warmer, stronger. For just a moment, maybe 5 seconds, Christopher felt absolute certainty. Not hope, not wishful thinking, but genuine knowing that he would see that number. "Good," Zephyr's voice came softly. "Now add gratitude. Thank the universe for showing you this number. Thank it as if it has already happened." Then doubt crashed in like a wave. "This is stupid. This isn't real. I'm talking to myself in my workshop." "Enough," Zephyr said. "You held the frequency for approximately 7 seconds. That is sufficient for a small manifestation." Christopher opened his eyes. "That's it? I just think about it and feel grateful?" You operated at the frequency of already having experienced it. You aligned your consciousness with that reality. Now the physical world will shift to match. Within 24 hours, you will see the number 47 in an unlikely context. And when you do, you will know you manifested it. And if I don't see it, you will. The law is absolute. Consciousness creates reality. You have set the intention, reality will respond. Yes, we will. Christopher spent the morning doing routine maintenance on his truck, trying not to think about the experiment, but his mind kept drifting back to it. What if it worked? What if he actually saw the number? Christopher pocketed the crystal, still skeptical. We'll see. And more importantly, what if he didn't? Around noon, his truck started making an odd rattling sound. He pulled over to the side of the rural highway and popped the hood. Nothing obviously wrong. He walked around to check the tires. The rear passenger tire was flat. Perfect, he muttered. Just perfect. He opened the truck bed to get the spare tire, then moved to the back to open the tailgate. As he did, his eyes fell on something he'd never noticed before. On the inside of the tailgate, faded and weathered, was an old inspection sticker, the kind the county used to require years ago. Inspection number 47. Christopher froze. His heart began to pound. He looked closer, touching the sticker with trembling fingers. It had been there for years, probably a decade or more. He'd opened this tailgate hundreds of times and never noticed it. He drove into town to get the flat repaired, his mind churning. One instance of the number could be coincidence, could be selective attention, seeing something that was always there because he was now primed to notice it. But his hands shook as he changed the tire. Coincidence, he whispered. It's just a coincidence. I'm noticing it now because I'm looking for it. At the tire shop, he waited in the small lobby while they patched the tire to distract himself. He picked up a magazine from the rack, some generic lifestyle publication he'd never normally read. He opened it to a random page. The headline, in large bold letters, 47 Ways to Transform Your Life. Christopher dropped the magazine like it had burned him. The woman behind the counter looked up. You okay, hon? Fine, Christopher managed. Just fine. 2 instances. 2 times seeing the number 47 within an hour. That could still be coincidence. The number 47 wasn't that rare. It could appear anywhere, but his hands were shaking as he paid for the tire repair. The total came to $47 even. Sir, your card. Christopher stared at the receipt. The cashier had to repeat herself twice before he heard her. He paid in a daze and walked out to his truck. 3 times. 3 instances of the number 47 in less than 2 hours. That was pushing the boundaries of coincidence. He sat in his truck, breathing hard, staring at the receipt. Invoice number 4. 70047. 4 times. A car pulled into the parking spot next to him. Christopher's eyes automatically went to the license plate. Okay, he whispered to himself. Okay, this is strange, but it could still be GRK 4700. 5 times. 5 manifestations of the same number in less than 3 hours. Christopher's vision blurred. His breath came in short gasps. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be possible. Numbers didn't just appear because you thought about them. Reality didn't work that way. He drove home in a fog, his mind unable to process what was happening. When he pulled into his driveway, he sat in the truck for 10 minutes, just breathing, trying to make sense of the impossible. Except apparently, it did. Finally, he walked to the workshop. It wasn't a question. Zephyr was waiting. You saw it. 5 times. That is more than I expected. Your intention must have been very clear. 5 times, Christopher said, his voice hollow. I saw the number 47 5 times in 3 hours. On my truck. In a magazine. On a receipt. On an invoice number. On a license plate. But how? How is that possible? Those things were already there. The sticker on my truck has been there for years. The magazine was already printed. The invoice numbers are generated by a computer. How could I have created any of that? Christopher sank onto his workbench. That's insane. You did not create them. You aligned your consciousness with the timeline where you would encounter them. Reality is not singular, Christopher. It is infinite possibilities existing simultaneously. Your consciousness selects which possibility you experience. It is quantum physics. Your scientists call it the observer effect. The act of observation collapses the wave function and determines which reality manifests. You have been doing this your entire life, unconsciously. Today, you did it consciously. For small things, with practice. Yes, for larger manifestations, health, wealth, relationships, it requires sustained focus over time. And most importantly, it requires that you stop contradicting your manifestation with negative thoughts. What do you mean? So I can just think about anything and it appears. You can practice manifestation for 5 minutes each morning. But if you spend the rest of the day thinking, I have no money, nothing ever works out for me, I am unlucky, you cancel the manifestation. Every negative thought is a decree against what you desire. Christopher thought about how many times a day he complained, how often he focused on problems, how constantly he worried about money, health, loneliness, hundreds of times, maybe thousands. So I've been manifesting my own misery. Yes, for decades. Through constant focus on scarcity, you have created more scarcity. Through constant worry about health, you have created health problems. Through constant focus on loneliness, you have created more loneliness. Christopher put his head in his hands. Oh God, what have I done? And there you go again. Focusing on loss. Focusing on waste. Focusing on the past. Every such thought is a decree. Give me more loss. Give me more waste. Give me more regret. You have done what almost all humans do. You have operated unconsciously, allowing your mind to run wild with negative thoughts, and those thoughts have created your reality. But now you know, and knowing changes everything. Does it? Because right now, all I can think about is the 40 years I wasted, the life I could have had if I'd known this. Christopher looked up sharply. So what am I supposed to do? Just pretend the past didn't happen? No. Acknowledge the past, learn from it, and then release it. Stop giving it energy. Stop focusing on it. Because every moment you spend focused on past failure is a moment you are not focused on future success. That's easier said than done. Of course it is. Mental discipline is the hardest work there is. Jesus spent years mastering it. You will not master it overnight, but you can begin right now, in this moment. Start with gratitude, not for what you have. Your mind will reject that as false, but for what you are creating. Thank the universe for the perfect health that is coming, for the abundance that is flowing to you, for the connections and relationships that are forming. Feel it as if it is already real. Christopher took a deep breath. How? Christopher stood slowly, the crystal still warm in his pocket. 5 instances of the number 47. 5 impossible coincidences that proved consciousness created reality. But it's not real. Not yet. But it will be if you hold the frequency long enough. This is what Jesus taught. This is what the church buried. And this is what will transform your life if you have the courage to practice it. I understand. I will. But Christopher, this knowledge comes with responsibility. Once you understand your power, you can no longer blame anyone else for your life. Not God. Not other people. Not circumstances. You become fully responsible for your reality. Teach me, he said quietly. Teach me everything Jesus taught. Everything the church hid. Do you? Because most people, when faced with that responsibility, retreat back into victimhood. It is easier to be powerless. Easier to blame. Easier to remain small. 63 years of being a victim. Christopher thought about his life. 63 years of feeling powerless. 63 years of blaming God. blaming his ex-wife, blaming his boss, blaming bad luck. And he was so tired of it. "I'm ready," he said firmly. "Show me what Jesus really taught." And Zephyr, the being from 39 light years away, began to teach Christopher Hewitt the secrets that had been hidden for 2,000 years. The secrets that would change everything. Over the next 2 days, as Christopher completed the final repairs on Zephyr's craft, the alien revealed truths that shattered every religious belief Christopher had held sacred. They worked in the workshop, Christopher's hands busy with repairs while his mind expanded with knowledge that seemed both revolutionary and somehow ancient, as if he'd always known these truths, but had forgotten them. "Let me show you what the church did to Jesus' teachings," Zephyr said on the fourth morning. "It is a masterclass in institutional manipulation." The holographic projector activated again, showing Jesus teaching to a small group of disciples in what looked like a private home. This is approximately 32 AD. Jesus is explaining the core principle to his closest followers. Christopher watched as Jesus gestured emphatically, pointing to his chest, then to each disciple in turn. His expression was intense, urgent, as if he was trying to convey something crucial. "That sounds like blasphemy," Christopher said automatically, then caught himself. "Or, what I was taught was blasphemy." He is saying the kingdom of God is within you. Not in some distant heaven. Not in the temple, within your own consciousness. You are not separate from God. You are expressions of God, individualized aspects of the infinite creative consciousness. Exactly. The church labeled it blasphemy because it threatened their power structure. If people understood they had direct access to God within themselves, they would not need priests as intermediaries. Here he is teaching the multitudes. But watch what happens. He speaks in parables and metaphors. Why? The holographic scene shifted, showing Jesus speaking to a larger crowd. Because Christopher thought back to Sunday school lessons. Because he wanted to make it simple for common people to understand? No, because he was hiding the real teachings in plain sight. He said himself, "To you, it has been given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God, but to others I speak in parables so that seeing they may not see, and hearing they may not understand." He was deliberately obscuring the message. The hologram shifted again, showing Jesus with his inner circle, Peter, John, James, and a few others. He was protecting it. The Roman authorities and the religious establishment would have killed him immediately if they understood what he was really teaching. So he taught the masses in parables, but gave the real knowledge to those who were ready to receive it. To these he taught directly. He explained the laws of manifestation, the power of consciousness, the truth that humans are creators, not victims. But even they struggled to understand. Christopher watched as Jesus seemed to be demonstrating something, his hands moving in specific patterns, his expression focused and intense. He is teaching them a manifestation technique. A specific method for aligning consciousness with desired outcomes. Watch his hands. Jesus' hands moved in a circular pattern, then pressed together at his heart, then extended outward as if offering something. This is a technique for energy circulation. He is teaching them to draw universal energy into the heart center, amplify it with emotion, and project it outward as intention. This is how he performed healings. So it was a technique, not a miracle. It was both. A miracle is simply a law of nature. You do not yet understand. Jesus understood laws of consciousness that your science is only beginning to discover. The scene changed again, showing Jesus alone on a mountainside in deep meditation. He spent hours each day in this state, not praying in the way you were taught, not begging an external God for favors. He was aligning his consciousness with Source, raising his frequency, maintaining the elevated state necessary for manifestation. So when the Bible says he went off to pray, Christopher set down his tools, giving the hologram his full attention. Okay, so if this is true, if Jesus was teaching manifestation techniques, what happened? How did it get so distorted? He was practicing consciousness discipline, meditation, energy work, maintaining the high frequency necessary to perform what you call miracles. Watch. The hologram showed a man Christopher recognized from religious paintings, Paul, writing letters by candlelight. The hologram fast-forwarded, showing scenes in rapid succession: Jesus' crucifixion, his followers scattering in fear, small groups meeting in secret, then larger gatherings, then buildings, then grand cathedrals. After his death, his followers tried to continue the teachings. But within a generation, the message began to change. Paul of Tarsus, who never met Jesus, began teaching a different doctrine. One focused on sin, guilt, and the need for external salvation. Perhaps he genuinely misunderstood. Perhaps he was influenced by his Roman background and saw the value of a centralized authority structure. Or perhaps he understood exactly what he was doing, creating an institution that would give him and his successors tremendous power. Why? Why would he do that? Paul was brilliant, charismatic, and politically savvy. He transformed Jesus' teachings of empowerment into a religion of dependence. He emphasized that humans were sinful, powerless, in need of salvation that could only come through the church. The hologram showed the growth of the early church, spreading across the Roman Empire. Within 3 centuries, the church had become a political force. The Council of Nicaea in 325 AD formalized doctrines that served institutional power rather than spiritual truth. They decided which texts would be included in the Bible and which would be banned. Banned? There were other texts? Dozens. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Philip. Texts that contained more direct teachings about consciousness and manifestation. The church labeled them heretical and destroyed most copies. But why? If they contained Jesus' teachings, because they contained the wrong teachings. Teachings that empowered individuals rather than institutions. For example, the Gospel of Thomas quotes Jesus saying, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." The hologram showed scenes of the Inquisition, of book burnings, of people being executed for heresy. Christopher felt chills run down his spine. That's about manifestation, about bringing forth your inner creative power. Exactly. And the church could not allow such teachings to spread, so they buried them. They burned them. They killed people who taught them, and they replaced them with doctrines of sin, guilt, and dependence on institutional authority. For 2,000 years, the church has maintained power by keeping people ignorant of their own creative power, by teaching that God is external, distant, judgmental, by teaching that humans are powerless sinners in need of salvation that only the church can provide. Christopher felt anger rising in his chest, hot, fierce anger at the deception, at the waste, at the millions of lives lived in unnecessary suffering. Careful, Zephyr warned. Anger is low frequency. It will not serve you. How can I not be angry? They lied. For 2,000 years they lied. Yes, but anger keeps you trapped in victim consciousness. Transform the anger into purpose. You know the truth now. Use it. Live it. Become an example of what is possible when humans understand their true nature. Christopher took several deep breaths, trying to calm the storm inside him. Okay, so show me. Show me exactly what Jesus taught. The real techniques. Very well. But understand, these techniques require practice. Jesus spent years mastering them. You will not master them overnight. I understand. Just show me. Zephyr moved to the holographic projector, adjusting it. The image shifted, showing Jesus in that private teaching setting again. This is the core teaching. The technique Jesus used for manifestation. It has 3 components: clear intention, elevated emotion, and absolute certainty. All 3 must be present simultaneously. The hologram showed Jesus demonstrating, his hands moving through specific positions. First, clear intention. You must know exactly what you desire, not vague wishes, specific, detailed outcomes. Jesus did not say, "I hope there is enough food." He held the specific intention. There is abundant food for everyone here. The hologram showed Jesus at the multiplication of loaves and fishes, his expression focused and certain. Second, elevated emotion. You must feel the emotion of already having what you desire, not the emotion of wanting it. That is the frequency of lack. But the emotion of gratitude, joy, satisfaction of already possessing it. Christopher watched as Jesus' expression shifted to one of profound gratitude, his face uplifted, his entire body radiating joy. Third, absolute certainty. No doubt, no maybe. No I hope, complete knowing that what you intend is already real in consciousness and therefore must manifest in physical reality. The hologram showed Jesus breaking the bread, distributing it, his movements confident and assured, no hesitation, no doubt. When all three components align, clear intention, elevated emotion, absolute certainty, manifestation is inevitable. It is law, like gravity. Consciousness creates reality. But I can't do that, Christopher protested. I can't feel certainty about something that hasn't happened yet. You can. You did it with the number 47. For 7 seconds you held all three components. And reality responded. You simply need to extend those 7 seconds into minutes, then hours, then a constant state of being. That sounds impossible. Try again, Zephyr said. But this time, manifest something larger, not just a number. Something tangible that will improve your life. It is difficult, but not impossible. Jesus did it, and he said explicitly, you will do greater works than these. He was not claiming exclusivity. He was inviting you to join him in mastery. Christopher looked at his hands. Calloused, scarred from decades of mechanical work. Could these hands really shape reality itself? Like what? You mentioned financial struggle. Manifest a specific amount of money, not a vague more money, a specific amount from a specific source, by a specific time. Christopher thought, okay, $500 from an unexpected source within 1 week. Good. Specific. Now close your eyes, hold the crystal, and feel what it would be like to receive $500 unexpectedly. Christopher closed his eyes, gripping the crystal. He tried to imagine checking his mailbox and finding a check, or getting a call about a job that paid exactly that amount. But it felt fake, forced. His mind kept interjecting, this is stupid. This won't work. You're just wasting time. You are trying with your mind, Zephyr observed. You must feel with your heart. Remember a time when you received unexpected money. Remember how that felt. Christopher thought back. Years ago, he'd found $100 bill in an old jacket pocket. The surprise, the relief, the sudden lightness in his chest. He held on to that feeling and amplified it. $500, unexpected. Within a week, the feeling grew stronger. For maybe 15 seconds, he felt genuine gratitude, genuine certainty. 15 seconds, Zephyr said. Better. Practice this every morning. 5 minutes of holding that frequency, and watch what happens. Then doubt crashed back in. And if nothing happens, something will happen. The law is absolute. But Christopher, you must stop contradicting the manifestation with negative thoughts throughout the day. Every time you think I have no money, you cancel the manifestation. Every time you worry about bills, you reinforce scarcity. So I have to control every thought? Christopher nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try. Eventually, yes. But start with awareness. Simply notice when you have negative thoughts. Do not judge them. Just notice, and gently redirect to positive affirmations. Do not try, do not try. Do as your Yoda said, do or do not. There is no try. Christopher laughed despite himself. You know Star Wars? Over the next day, as Christopher completed the final repairs on the craft, Zephyr continued the teachings. He showed Christopher breathing techniques for raising frequency, visualization methods for clarifying intention, energy circulation practices for amplifying emotion. We have been observing your planet for a long time. Your entertainment often contains more truth than your religions. And slowly, Christopher began to understand. This wasn't religion. This was technology, consciousness technology that Jesus had mastered and tried to teach, but which had been buried under 2,000 years of institutional distortion. On the evening of the fifth day, the craft was fully repaired. "It's done," Christopher said, stepping back to admire his work. "You can go home." Zephyr went to the craft and returned with 3 crystals, larger and brighter than the one Christopher had been using. "Yes, but first, I must give you something. These are amplifiers. Use them while you practice. They will help you maintain elevated frequency until your natural state rises high enough that you no longer need them." Christopher took the crystals, feeling their warmth, their gentle pulsing. "Thank you for everything, for showing me the truth. The truth was always available." Christopher, "You simply were not ready to see it until now, but you are ready now, and what you do with this knowledge will determine the rest of your life. Will I see you again? If you truly master these teachings, you will not need to see me. You will be able to access any knowledge directly from source consciousness, just as Jesus did." The craft's door opened, a seamless portal appearing in the smooth surface. "Goodbye, Christopher Hewitt. Remember, thought creates, emotion amplifies. Certainty manifests. That is the formula. Use it wisely." Zephyr entered the craft. The door sealed, and in the space of a heartbeat, the craft simply vanished, not flying away but ceasing to exist in this location. Christopher stood alone in his workshop, holding 3 impossible crystals, his mind filled with knowledge that would change everything. And for the first time in 63 years, he felt truly alive. The first week after Zephyr's departure was the hardest of Christopher's life. Not because anything bad happened, but because he was forced to confront just how negative his thinking had been for 6 decades. He started the practice. Zephyr had taught him 5 minutes every morning, holding one of the crystals, feeling gratitude for the $500 he intended to manifest. The first morning, he managed maybe 30 seconds of genuine elevated emotion before doubt crashed in. "This is ridiculous. Money doesn't appear because you think about it. You're wasting time." But he persisted. And on the second morning, he managed a full minute. The real challenge came throughout the day. Zephyr had instructed him to observe his thoughts, to notice when negative patterns emerged. He complained constantly about the weather, about his aching back, about the bills piling up, about his loneliness, about his age, about his failed marriage, about opportunities he'd missed. Hundreds of negative thoughts every single day, each one a decree to the universe. "Give me more of this to complain about." Christopher was horrified by what he discovered. On the third day, he started keeping a tally. By noon, he'd counted over 50 negative thoughts. "Good God," he muttered, then caught himself. Even that was negative. He started the practice of redirecting. Every time he caught a negative thought, he would stop and replace it with an affirmative one. "I have no money. Money flows to me easily and frequently. My back hurts. My body is healing and growing stronger every day. I'm so alone. I am connected to Source, and meaningful relationships are coming into my life." It felt fake at first, like lying to himself. And on the 5th day, something shifted. He was working in his shop when his phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. Christopher's mother had died 3 years ago. He'd settled her estate, or thought he had. "Hello? Mr. Hewitt, this is Margaret Chen from Mountain Valley Insurance. I'm calling about a policy your late mother had. We've been trying to reach you for several months. I wasn't aware of any outstanding policies." "Yes, it was a small life insurance policy she took out in the 1980s. It's been accruing interest. After processing fees, the payout comes to $547. We can direct deposit it to your account if you have a moment to verify your information." Christopher nearly dropped the phone. $547. He'd manifested $500, and the universe had delivered $547. The number 47 again. "Mr. Hewitt? Are you still there? After the call ended, Christopher sat in his workshop, staring at his phone, his hands shaking. Yes, he managed. Yes, I'm here. I'll give you my account information. Christopher pulled out the crystal and held it to his chest. And for the first time in his life, he felt genuine gratitude. Not the performative gratitude of church prayers, but real, deep, overwhelming thankfulness. It had worked. He'd held a clear intention for $500 from an unexpected source within a week. And exactly that had manifested with the number 47 as a signature. As if the universe was confirming, yes, this was you. You created this. It was real. All of it was real. Consciousness created reality. And he had just proven it. Over the next 2 months, Christopher's life began to change in ways both subtle and profound. The $500 was just the beginning. A former colleague called out of the blue, offering him a consulting job on a restoration project. A 1967 Mustang that needed expert attention. The pay was generous and the work was enjoyable. His back pain, which had plagued him for years, began to subside. Not overnight, but gradually, as he consistently held the intention of perfect health and stopped complaining about his body. A neighbor he barely knew, Susan, a widow in her late 50s, stopped by to ask for help with her tractor. They got to talking. She mentioned a spiritual study group she hosted weekly. You should come, she said. We discuss all kinds of topics, consciousness, manifestation, the nature of reality. I think you'd find it interesting. Christopher went. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. The group was small. 6 people, all seekers in their own way, all questioning the mainstream narratives about God and reality. Christopher shared some of what he'd learned carefully, without mentioning the alien encounter. They were hungry for the knowledge. That makes so much sense, Susan said, after Christopher explained the principle of gratitude before manifestation. I've been praying wrong my whole life. I've been asking from a place of lack instead of thanking from a place of abundance. We all have, Christopher said. We were taught to pray that way, but Jesus demonstrated something different. Over the weeks, the study group became a lifeline. Christopher taught what Zephyr had taught him, and the group practiced together. And as they practiced, their lives began to change. Susan manifested a book deal for a memoir she'd been writing for years. Maria, a single mother, manifested a promotion at work that doubled her income. Tom, a retired teacher, manifested reconciliation with his estranged son. Small miracles, but miracles nonetheless. And Christopher realized this was how it was supposed to spread, not through preaching, not through institutions, but through example, through lived experience, through people seeing real transformation and wanting to know how. 3 months after Zephyr's departure, Christopher stood in the same field where the craft had landed. It was early morning, the sun just beginning to paint the Montana sky in shades of gold and pink. He held the 3 crystals in his hands, feeling their warmth, their gentle pulsing, but he realized something: he didn't need them anymore. His frequency had risen naturally through consistent practice. He could feel it, a lightness in his chest, a clarity in his mind, a sense of connection to something vast and loving that he'd never felt before. This was what Jesus had felt. This state of consciousness, this alignment with Source. Christopher heard a car approaching and turned to see Pastor Williams pulling up in his old sedan. The pastor got out, his expression troubled. Christopher, I heard you've been holding meetings, teaching some kind of alternative spirituality. I've been teaching what Jesus actually taught, Christopher said calmly. Before the church distorted it, Pastor Williams' face reddened. You're leading people astray. You're teaching heresy. I'm teaching people that they have power, that God is within them, that they can create their own reality through consciousness. Is that heresy? Yes. It's pride. It's the original sin, humans thinking they can be like God. You're taking it out of context. Christopher smiled gently. Pastor, Jesus said, you are gods. John 10:34. He was quoting Psalm 82. He explicitly taught that humans have divine nature. The church just chose to ignore that part.